Welcome to the third section of this video course. In this section, we're going to be talking about object-oriented programming and how Kotlin supports it. We'll learn about classes and interfaces in Kotlin. We'll see how to define primary and secondary constructors and what are some differences between Kotlin and Java in terms of classes. We'll also talk about null safety and the concept of data classes. Compiler can generate some methods for us. For example, hashcode and equals. We'll also talk about how Kotlin doesn't have static like Java has, static keyword, and we'll see what are our alternatives for mimicking static from Java. In this first video, we're going to be talking about classes and constructors, and we'll see how to declare classes in Kotlin, how to declare primary and secondary constructors, and how to call constructors or how to initialize classes. Now let's talk about classes in Kotlin. We've already talked about properties and we've seen how to define a property inside of the class constructor, and we did this inside of a primary constructor. Primary constructor in Kotlin is declared in the class header and it follows the class name. You can have only one primary constructor per class. Here the second example also has a primary constructor, and when compiled it will produce similar if not the same Java bytecode, and the only difference will be in the class name. But in this second example I'm defining my properties inside of the class body and I'm initializing them inside of initializer block. Initializer block is reserved for primary constructor, and usually you will not be defining your properties like this. The initializer block is reserved, actually should be used if you need some additional either logging or some additional initialization that you don't have inside of the constructor, or if you want to perform some other logic or call some functions. The first example is the preferred way of defining class with properties, and it's way more concise. And we have here a third example, and again the only difference in Java bytecode will be in the class name. And we can see here that if you want to assign values to your properties, you can do it also in line. You don't have to use initializer key block for this. So we have three examples. All will produce similar, if not the same Java bytecode, but the first one should be used because it's the preferred and the most concise way. We also see here in this example a perfectly valid declaration of a class in Kotlin. Please notice that it doesn't have a constructor nor class body. And because it doesn't have a class body, curly braces are also optional, and compiler will let us compile. And this is, like I said, a perfectly valid class in Kotlin. And in the end, we also have to mention that if you want to apply some kind of annotation to your primary constructor, you always have to have a constructor keyword before the constructor. In Kotlin, you can also have secondary constructors, and the only reason why they exist is because of Java interoperability. We previously saw how you can have default value parameters in constructors also, and this is how you should do constructor overloading in Kotlin. You should have only one constructor defined, one primary constructor, and you should define default values to it. And the syntax for secondary constructor is just a constructor keyword, and it has to be defined inside of a constructor inside of the class body. So in this example, we have a primary constructor, a class with a primary constructor, and we have a secondary constructor with one additional constructor parameter. And you can see here that I'm explicitly calling the primary constructor. If I remove this, immediately I'll get a compiler error that I have to explicitly call the primary constructor. And I have to provide this constructor argument. And if I go back, again, compiler error is gone. And you can also see that secondary constructors have their own initializer blocks. That's the reason why we have init keyword, and like we said, it is reserved only for primary constructor. And just in the end, we have to mention that you can have as many secondary constructors as you want, but you should only use them if you need Java interoperability. Finally, let's take a look at how constructors are called in Kotlin. Here I have two examples. I'm calling an empty constructor, and in the second example I'm calling a constructor with two type parameters. And you can see that unlike with Java, which has a new keyword, constructor calls are same as method calls in Kotlin. Okay, now that we know how to declare classes, how to define primary and secondary constructors,